So, April the 29th, 2018 is the day. The title of the message is Let Yourself Be Found. Let Yourself Be Found. We're going to be reading from the Gospel of Luke chapter 15, and if you would like to be turning there. But before we start reading, I just want to share with you that I believe that this message is a prophetic message for our church as a body, as a group, but also for you as an individual. So please pay attention and please really hear what God may be speaking to you in and through this message, because I do believe it's prophetic for this time and this season that we are in. I do believe that this is a time for us to let ourselves be found. As you know, we've said this many times. Don has said this when he came to Nashville. He was hidden. We've been hidden. We've grown from 40 to 20. We've grown from, whatever to something less. And we've been hidden. But this message will bring you joy in knowing that we've been hidden. We've been hidden, but I believe that God is bringing us into a time where we will be found. And we have to let ourselves be found, as you will see. So this idea of hiding, we've all hidden in our lives. We all play those child games, hide and seek, all that kind of stuff. We all play peekaboo like we're hiding our face, and surprise, here we are again. We've all hidden in our lives, and it's part of our nature to hide. Hiding isn't necessarily a bad thing. There's value in hiding. There's value in hiding yourself. There's value in hiding things that are valuable to you, right? When you go on vacation, you have that nice pearl necklace or that diamond earring, right? You hide it somewhere in your sock in a suitcase. So if the maids come in, they don't steal your jewelry. Or if you have money, you try to hide your money. There's nothing wrong with hiding something or being hidden. There's nothing wrong with that. And to tell you the truth, it's really a way of God. God has a way of hiding himself, of hiding things that are valuable, of hiding mysteries. But there is a difference in often his version of hiding things and our version. Usually when we hide for eternity. We hide and we don't ever want to be found. The reason God hides is to be found. It's so that we may find things, right? We've preached on the mysteries of God here. There's a scripture that says, it is the glory of God to conceal a matter, and it is the glory of a king to search it out, to find it. Right? There is something unique about God's way of hiding. He never hides for eternity. He never has a perspective that when he hides or when he hides something, that it will never be found. But as you know, in the garden, in the beginning of the creation, Adam and Eve sinned. And when God came walking in the garden, not in the wilderness, Adam and Eve were doing what?
Hiding.
They were hiding. And God says, "Where are you?" And they respond. And so there is something in their nature that they knew to hide. They hid because they did something wrong, because they had shame, because they had guilt. But they hid. And the hiding wasn't what was bad. Because God came along and said, "Where are you?" And they responded. And they said, "We're right here. We were scared. We were afraid. And so we hid." On and on the story goes. But I just want you to realize that they hid. And it wasn't bad that they hid. But it was good that when God said, "Where are you?" they said, "We're here." And although we hid ourselves because we were afraid, we're not going to stop ourselves from being found. So, in your life, do you hide? Do you hide from your spouse? Do you hide from your friends? Do you hide from the law enforcement? Do you hide from the government? Do you hide from work? What do you hide from? What are things that you hide? Do you hide the treasure that is within you? Do you hide your own value? Do you hide the talents God's given you? What are the things that you hide in your life? What's hidden in your life? Hopefully you found Luke chapter 15 by now. But if you haven't, please turn there. Luke chapter 15. We're going to start in verse 11, and this is the story of the prodigal son. And we're going to see how this idea of hiding and being hidden plays a crucial role in their lives and also in ours. So before we start reading, let me point something out to you here. In verse 11 it says, "And he said, a man had two sons." So Jesus is telling this story about a man who had two sons. The perspective that I am sharing with you tonight is not one of salvation. This is a relationship where the father and the son already know each other. They are already in relationship. Okay? If you read earlier in chapter 15 about the lost sheep and the lost coin, those would probably reflect more of salvation. And you can even show salvation in the story of the prodigal son, but that is not what I'm trying to explain tonight. Okay? So don't get that confused. I'm sharing from a perspective of there is already established a relationship between the father and the son. Okay? So, next thing is there's two sons. There's going to be a younger son and an older son. Two sons. Really one son, as you will see, but two sons, okay? So let's read, starting in verse 11 of chapter 15. "And he said, a man had two sons. The younger of them said to his father, 'Father, give me the share of the estate that falls to me.' So he divided his wealth between them. And many days later, the younger son gathered everything together and went on a journey into a distant country. And there he squandered his estate with loose living. Now, when he had spent everything, a severe famine occurred in that country, and he began to be impoverished. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, and he sent him into his fields to feed swine. And he would have gladly filled his stomach with the pods that the swine were eating, and no one was giving anything to him." Let's stop right there. Are you catching the setup here? So here's the son who has had a relationship with the father enough to at least say, "Hey, can I get my share of the estate? Can I receive my inheritance?" The father says, "Yes, you may. You are my son." He gives him the inheritance. He goes out. He blows it. He finds himself in a famine, hungry, famished. So he has to go get a job. He gets a job working for a landowner, a person who owns pigs. And the owner tells him, "Go out and feed the pigs. Feed the swine." He goes out to feed the swine, and he's so hungry, he's so famished, that he considers eating the pig food. Okay? Now, I'm not sure exactly what the pig food is, but I've never seen any pig food that's worth anything. So I don't think that this would be very edible or worth eating. Maybe it would keep him alive. But he seriously considers eating this pig food. Verse 17. "But when he came to himself," or your version may read, "to his senses, he said, 'How many of my father's hired men have more than enough bread, but I am dying here with hunger?'" Now, this is the first step in allowing yourself to be found. The reason you are hiding is probably because you've squandered something of your own, or you're afraid, or you're trying to protect something, right? And he says, "But when he came to his senses, he said," the first step in being found is that you got to come to your senses. You have to come to yourself. Now what that means is not that you have to have all the answers, that you have to figure it out, but it simply means that you have to recognize where you are. You have to be able to say, "I'm in a pig pen, I'm feeding pigs, I'm starving, and I'm literally about to eat this pig food." Now, maybe you were the type of person that when you were about to eat the pig food, you still had enough strength and energy within yourself to say, "Well, I'm still not going to go home. I'm going to stay here and eat the pig food." He didn't eat the pig food. Maybe you have. I know sometimes I've eaten that pig food, and it's not good. It doesn't satisfy. It doesn't fulfill you. It doesn't meet your needs. Whatever that food may be for you, But he says he came to his senses. He had some degree of recognition of the situation he was in. I stink. I'm feeding pigs. I'm hungry. This is a horrible condition. Right? That's what he realizes. And he says, how many of my father's hired men have more than enough bread, but I am dying here with hunger? You see, the first step is honesty. Honesty and humility. We have to be honest with our situation, our circumstance. We have to be humble enough to say, look, I'm in a position where someone else is doing better than me. Even if they're a hired hand, they're still doing better than me. We have to be humble enough to be honest with ourselves. In Ephesians chapter 5, these are two examples of things that God calls us to do before He gives us a promise of what He will do. In Ephesians chapter 5, verse 14, you're probably familiar with this scripture. It says, awake, awake, O sleeper. And it says, arise, arise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you. A lot of times we wait for God to come to our pig pen before we're willing to say, hey, we're in a pig pen. Right? You know the mess you're in. You may try to deny it. You may try to justify it. But down deep inside of your heart, you know you're in trouble. You know you're hungry. You know that you're cold. You know that you smell. You know that you've made mistakes. Ephesians 5, awake, sleeper, arise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you. God is saying here, I want you to do something before Christ shines on you. Another example, Revelation chapter 3, verses 1 and 2. He's telling the church of Ephesus here. Or excuse me, the church of Sardis. He says, to the angel of the church in Sardis write, who has the seven spirits of God and the seven stars, says this, I know your deeds, that you have a name, that you are alive, but you are dead. So he tells them, you're dead, right? But then what does he say? He says, wake up. He says, wake up. He tells a dead person to wake up. How does a dead person wake up? Wake up and strengthen the things that remain, which are about to die, for I have not found your deeds completed in the sight of my God. You need to face the reality of your death in the situation and circumstances you're in. That's how you wake up. You wake up by looking around and saying, I am dead. I have no life. I have no energy. I have no strength. I have no grace. And you recognize something's wrong here. You've all been through this. You've all been in that scenario where you knew something was wrong, and you didn't say anything, and you didn't say anything, and you didn't say anything, and you held it inside, right? And how did you feel? You felt horrible. You felt like you were just slowly dying. You were just slowly sinking. But the moment you decided to say, hey, this sucks. This is horrible. This is death. This is not what I wanted. What happens? Something changes, right? Something lifts. Something starts to come up inside of you. Something starts to rise up. You start to become awake. If you jump down in the church of Sardis, he says, if you wake up and strengthen these things that remain, the blessing he gives, he says, he who overcomes will thus be clothed in white garments, and I will not erase his name from the book of life. And I will confess his name before my Father and before his angels. One more example. Jesus and Lazarus. You know, Lazarus was dead for a couple of days. He was in the grave. He was wrapped up. And when Jesus comes, he says, Lazarus, come forth. Now, Lazarus comes forth, it says, with his hands and his feet bound. Right? And it says that he was still wrapped in the garments of his burial. And Jesus told people to unwrap him. Now, if we saw that coming out of a grave, we would say that's still a dead man, that's still a zombie, that's still a mummy, or whatever you want to call it. Right? But Jesus spoke to Lazarus and told him to do something while he was dead. I've never really seen a bound man, hand and foot, walk and get up and come out of a tomb. But Lazarus did. Right? Even though you may be dead, even though you may be in death, even though you may be bound hand and foot and be wrapped up in all this junk, there is still something you can do. Amen. You can acknowledge your death. And you can say, I am bound up. I am wrapped up. I am in death. I stink. Right? You can do that. Right? You can say, I'm angry. You can say, I'm furious. You can say, I'm addicted. You can say, I'm sad and I'm upset. You can explain where you are. Right? To some degree. You have something inside of you that knows something is going on. But think about this. Back to Luke chapter 15. God uses the pig pen to help the prodigal son, this younger son who had blown his inheritance. God used the pig pen to remind him and help him to come to his senses. See, we have it backwards. In our society, when we see the pigs, what do? Oh, those pigs. Those pigs, right? They're animals. Whether it's a politician, whether it's your boss, whether it's someone who's done you wrong, right? They're a pig. They're a dirty, filthy person. They have no value. They're nothing, right? And we start blaming it on the pigs. Man, all you do is get in that mud and get everybody dirty. You're just ruining my life. And we start blaming our circumstances of death and being in a pig pen and feeding pigs and having to eat the pig food almost. And we use that as an excuse to justify our own actions. Right? We've all done this. We all wallow in our own junk. But if we would recognize that God is using the pigs to remind us of something better, it'd be a lot easier to come out of that pig pen. It'd be a lot different perspective that you would have when you look at those pigs. Right? When you looked at someone that you thought was a pig, if you knew that God was using them to remind you of where you're supposed to be, you wouldn't concern yourself with that pig, because every time you looked at it, you would say, I'm supposed to be looking over here. Right? God uses the pigs in our lives to remind us and to help us come to our senses. Don't fight the pigs. Don't wrestle with the pigs. Don't play in the mud. Don't eat the pig food. Just recognize that's where you are. Okay? So, let's go on. Verse 18. He says, as he's out here, as he's come to his senses, he's feeding the pigs, he's come to his senses, and he says, I will get up and go to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me as one of your hired men. So he got up and came to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion for him and ran and embraced him and kissed him. And the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven, and in your sight I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his slaves, Quickly bring out the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and sandals on his feet, and bring the fattened calf, kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. Let's stop right there. All this happened, the fattened calf, the sandals, the robe, the ring. It all started in that place of death, in that place of famish, in that place of famine. It all started with this prodigal son coming to his senses and saying, wait a second here. Something is wrong. Something is off. And then he makes a decision within himself, and he says, I will get up and I will go to my father. This is the beauty of sonship. Sonship always comes with freedom. Sonship always comes with a choice. This father did not stop his son from leaving with his money and with his inheritance. Did he? No. He gave it to him. He let him have it. Because the father knows that if you're going to be true sons, you must have free choice. You have free choice. And guess what? You can live in the pig pen if you want. You can live with the pigs. You can live hungry. You can live broken. You can live dirty. God will let you. He will let you. Because He loves you. And He's not going to force His will on you. His love for you is too great to force you to be in His will. Can you hear that? His love is too great to force you to do something against your own will. So the son, he makes a choice. I will get up and go to my father. We have a choice. But in our choice is this. We have to acknowledge our sin and confess it. Right? He says, I will get up and go to my father, and I will say to my father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight. I have sinned against you. You see, our choices to return to the Father always come with the reality of consequences and the reality of our sin. Right? When you're living in death, you have to acknowledge, hey, I'm in death. This is death. This is no life. This is the pig pen. But at some point you have to realize, I've done something to get here. God did not put me in a pig pen. I put myself here because this was my best option. So I thought, right? My own pride, my own arrogance. So there's choice. In sonship, there's a freedom of choice, but there's consequences to choice. There's consequences to choice. That's the reality we all face. It's pretty simple. Can God change our consequences miraculously? Sure, He can. But God does not just get rid of the consequences so that we can have a nice butterfly and daisy life. God allows there to be consequences so that we can learn what true sonship is. People are either motivated by two things, pain or gain. Right? Loss or gain. Pain or gain. Pain, people who are motivated by pain make choices when they realize that the pain of staying put is greater than the pain of going on. Did you get that? People motivated by pain make a choice when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of doing something else. Right? People who are motivated by gain make a choice when they see that the gain that can be had out there is greater than the gain that they are getting right now. Make sense? So, you're motivated by something. In the prodigal son, he was motivated by something. He realized that his condition and his pride of having to say to his father, hey, I've sinned against you, was not as bad as the pride, or was not as bad as the pain as staying in the pig pen. Right? And so he made a choice, I'm going to get out of here and I'm going to go back. Is it going to be hard to say to my father, hey, I've sinned against heaven? Hey, I've messed up. Sure, it's going to be hard. It's not going to be easy. But that's part of the reality we have to face. That's part of the consequences of our choice. But what did the father do? It says, while he was still a long way off, his father saw him, felt compassion for him, and ran, embraced him, and kissed him. So, back to verse 24, it says, for this son of mine was dead, and has come to life again. He was lost, and has been found. And they began to celebrate. Who brought the son back to life? Who found the son? The father and all the family of the father knew what was going on, as we're going to see. They knew where the son was, but no one went to the pig pen to get him. No one forced him to come to his senses. No one forced him to come home, right? But here it says, he was lost and has been found. He was dead and he has come to life. You see, when you start to make choices inside of yourself to acknowledge the death that you are in, you start to partake of life. A resurrection process starts to take place. Nobody particularly went out and found this person, found this son in the pig pen. But he made a choice to let himself be found by returning to his Father's house. Right? Does that make sense? You getting the picture? We have to let ourselves be found. You have to let yourself be found. Ultimately, God was working in his life. Ultimately, God was the one who was showing him, hey, this is your situation. Come to your senses. God was the one who created him with an ability to come to his senses. Right? Why does the pig never realize what he's eating is no good? He just keeps eating, right? You can throw a trash in a pig pen. They'll just go right through it. Tear it up. Love it. And it's like, hey, this is garbage. They don't care. But he gave men, and he gave man a unique ability to come to himself, to recognize what's happening within himself. You are self-aware. You are an autonomous person. Right? God created you that way. It was God who was working in him in the pig pen. It was God who was working in him when he was lost. But he made choices to be found. Let's keep reading. In verse 25, we're going to come to the older son now. This is the second son. Now his older son was in the field. And when he came and approached the house, he heard music and dancing. And he summoned one of the servants and began inquiring what these things could be. And he said to him, your brother has come, and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has received him back safe and sound. But he became angry and was not willing to go in. And his father came out and began pleading with him. Here's the prodigal son again. Right? Here's the older son, in a position where he is outside of the father's party. Right? And he's angry. And he's mad. And he's saying, what's going on? I'm the older son. And y'all are having a party without me. Right? He was angry and not willing to go in. His father came out and began pleading with him. But he answered and said to his father, look, for so many years I've been serving you. I've never neglected a command of yours. And yet you have never given me a young goat, so that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came, who has devoured your wealth with prostitutes, you killed the fattened calf for him? And he said to him, son, you have always been with me, and all that is mine is yours. You see, this older son knew what the younger son was doing. Because he hasn't talked to the younger son, but he tells his dad, he says, hey, you've been out with the prostitutes, right? So the family had to know what that younger son was doing. They didn't go chase him down. They didn't go get him. They didn't go pull him out of the pig pen. They let him make a choice to be found. If you don't want to be found, God's not going to force his way in. This child wanted to leave and live in a pig pen. And live as he thought was best. And the father let him. And the son who was at the house, the older son, he is still a prodigal son, but his prodigal identity is different. He's outside of the party, he's in the field, and he's on his way home. But when he comes, there's something he reveals about himself that was never revealed before the first son came home. And that was his anger. That was the inside of what was going on inside of himself. The first prodigal son, the problem you see was on the outside. He was in the pig pen. He had spent all the money. He had been with the prostitutes. The older son, the older prodigal son, his identity, his anger, his frustration was in turmoil within inside of himself. And he never said anything. He never told anyone. But when the father comes out, right? Just as the father came out when he saw the prodigal son returning from a distance, he went out to him and he greeted him. In the same way that the older son is standing outside of the party, the father comes outside of the party and he says, hey, what's going on? The older son tells him, and there's resolution that starts to happen in him. He starts to receive an identity of what he truly has. But let me just point some things out to you. There's two sons. There's two areas in you that need to be found. The first one is the younger son. The second one is the older son. Let me explain. Do you realize that both of these had objections to the father? The first son had an objection of, I'm not even worthy to go back. I'm not worthy to be in my father's house. Right? Because of the guilt and the shame of what he had done. But he made a choice to overcome that. The second son, he had an objection because of his anger, because of the turmoil within inside of himself. And he says, I'm not going into the party. But he made a choice to overcome that. The father, as I said, went out to both of them. The father went out to the first one, and the father went out to the second one. That's truly love. That's truly love that the father would go out to them. Even after they're in their anger, they're in their mess, they've made their mistakes, still the father goes out. The first area that you need to be found is the younger son. It's the area or the part of you that has left what God has said for your life. The part of you that has left what God has said. That's the first area you have to be found. And you have to make a choice to return to where you left. You have to let yourself be found. You have to make a choice to be found by the Father. God knows where you are. God knows what you're going through. But until you make a choice, and until you are willing in humility to say, I have sinned against you, I have sinned against heaven, and return to that which you left, God's going to be watching you. He's going to be knowing what's going on. But because He loves you, He will let you keep your choice. In Revelation chapter 2, verse 5, to the church of Ephesus, this is partially of what they went through. They left their first love. What did they have to do? They had to repent and return to the deeds that they had done at first, did they not? And if they returned, they would overcome. In Isaiah chapter 30, I'm sure you remember the message I preached on, this is the story of your life. Verse 15 of chapter 30 says, in return and rest is your salvation. Because you've gone out to Egypt. You've gone down to Egypt. You've covered yourself in the shadows of Egypt. You've played the worldly games. But in return and rest is your salvation. Many times throughout the Old Testament and Scripture, you find that God simply says, return, O Israel, and I would restore you. Return, O Israel. Return, O Israel, and I would subdue your enemies. Return. You don't have to fix yourself. Just come back to where you left. Just come back with humility. Come back to where you left. This is the first area. The second son, or the older son, is the second area. And this is the part of you that hides the inside of you. You have to be found in the part of you that left, and you have to be found in the part of you that was always there, but always was hiding inside of yourself. Whatever the reason was, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if you said, well, I'm not worthy enough to say something. Or I don't know how to say something. Whatever the reason you hid, that doesn't matter. What does matter is you have to make a choice not to hide. When the Father comes to you, you have to learn how to be honest and tell God how you really feel. You got to be able to tell God how you really feel. Look at the men of God throughout Scripture. Start simply with David. Was David hidden? Many times. David was out in the field when Samuel came to anoint, right? He was hidden. No one knew where he was. His father said, hey, go get him. He's out in the field. He comes, he's anointed. But still he's hidden, right? And when he comes up to face Goliath and say, hey, I can kill him. God's anointed me. I can do this. They laugh at him, right? But he has to make a choice. I'm going to let Saul know how I really feel. I can't wear your armor, Saul. I can't listen to you. I can't listen to my brothers who say I'm just here to watch the battle. He had to make a choice to tell God and to tell others how he really felt. What was really going on inside of him, right? Another time, David hid in the cave of Adullam, right? And Saul was coming to kill him. Saul was wanting to take his life. And he was hiding. He was hidden by God in the cave of Adullam. But he always had to make a choice to be honest with what's really going on inside of himself. What does he say when he cuts off that piece of Saul's robe? He says that my heart has smote me. Right? His own heart smote. He had to acknowledge that. He had to be honest about it. Think about Job. Job was a great guy. He was wonderful. He was supposedly the most righteous person in all the earth. What happened to Job? Job, tribulation. The devil comes, attacks him, right? But what did Job need? Job needed to let God know how he really felt inside when all this was happening. Right? That's what he does. There's a point in Job chapter 7 where he says, I will keep silent no longer. See, we have to make a decision to let ourselves be found. We have to make a decision to say, I'm not going to stay hidden. We have to make a decision to say, this is how I really feel, God. Even if it is anger, even if it is hate, even if it is filth. We have to make a decision. Think about Jonah. Jonah was hidden in the belly of a fish, right? But in that belly of a fish, he made a decision to do what? To cry out to God and say, God, this is how I really feel. I remember your promises. I remember your word. Jonah made it clear to God, hey, I don't want to go. Right? He made it clear to those people in the boat who threw him overboard. He said, look, this storm is happening because God's called me to do something and I don't want to do it. Honesty and humility to let God really know how you feel and let others know how you feel. Both of these sons are in us. The beauty of the first son is that when we return to where we started, it allows what's inside of us to truly come out. Because that first son would have never, the older son would have never said anything had the first son never come home. Right? That's what happens. When we allow ourselves to come back to God in humility, then there's something that starts to happen on the inside of us where we start to let God know how we really feel. It's how transformation works. You have to come back to the Father. You have to come back to someone who can heal you and help you. And then when you come back, you don't stop there. You have to be honest with what's inside of you. Whatever it looks like, whatever it is. God's not afraid. I want to close with one more example and one final thought. Jesus hid himself. Throughout all of Scripture, God hides himself. The book of Solomon, God hides himself from his lover. Right? That's one example. Jesus was hidden. Many times he told people, what does this have to do with me? My hour has not yet come. How many times does he tell his disciples, or does he tell someone that he's hid? Tell no one. Why would God do this? Why would Jesus Christ, the Savior of the world, do this? Why would he tell someone he's just healed? Tell no one that I've just healed you. Tell no one that I've just saved you. Right? A lot of times when we are saved, when God does something in our lives, we don't even think about tell no one. We think we got to tell everyone. Right? So we go around, here we are. This is what happened to me. This is what happened to me. This is what... Sometimes there's a place to be hidden. And there's a place to hide what God has done or what God is doing. My friends, we have been hidden. Jesus was hidden. He says, tell no one. My hour has not yet come. What does this have to do with me? Right? But in his hiding, there came a time, there came an hour where he had to allow himself to be found. And that hour was when? When they came to arrest him. He was with his disciples. He gave them the Last Supper. He tells them, hey, this is who I really am. He says, this is my body. This is my blood. Partake of it. He goes out into the garden to pray. What's the second thing? What's the second area? What's the second process? You got to let God know how you really feel, right? What does Jesus do? God, if there's any way, let this cup pass from me. Let this cup pass from me. Let this cup pass from me. You realize he prayed 3 times the same prayer? 3 times he asked God, let this pass from me. Of course, there was no other way. Do you realize that Jesus was hidden? Do you realize that when the hour came, he allowed himself to be found? He was honest with what was going on inside of himself. He gave up all of heaven. He gave up all of the richness and the safety and the protection. And he came and he made himself known to us. He became flesh and dwelt among us. He allowed himself to be found. He tells us in the Gospel of Matthew, he says, seek. He says, ask. He says, knock. Right? These are all characteristics of finding something. Right? Why did Jesus speak in parables? Because something was being hidden so that something else could be revealed. Right? Jesus hid himself. One last verse for you. Jeremiah 29:11 through 14. You're familiar probably with the first verse. God says, for I know the plans that I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans for welfare and not for calamity, to give you a future and a hope. Then you will call upon me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. Listen to this. You will seek me and find me. When you search for me with all your heart, I will be found by you, declares the Lord. And I will restore your fortunes and will gather you from all the nations and from all the places where I have driven you, declares the Lord. And I will bring you back to the place from where I sent you into exile. God wants to be found. He wants you to find him. And he wants you to be found. The fatal mistake of hiding is not in hiding, but it's in making the choice to never let yourself be found. Adam and Eve in the garden, they hid from the presence of the Lord, but they allowed themselves to be found. That's okay. God knows you've hidden. You've hidden yourself, you've hidden your things, you've hidden your talents, you've hidden your true feelings. God knows this. And the truth is, probably most of the people around you know it too. But please, please, please do not make the fatal mistake of not allowing yourself to be found. Because God is looking for you. And your brothers and your sisters in Christ are looking for you. They want to find who you truly are. They want to know who you truly are. If you do not allow yourself to be found, you will perish in hiding. That's a sad place to be. That's a sad place to be. If you're not willing to be humble enough to allow yourself to be found, to make choices, to say, look, I'm not perfect, but this is where I am. To make a choice and say, look, I've been here, I've been doing it, but I got some stuff inside of me that ain't pretty. Can I share with you what it is? Please don't try to stay hidden your whole life. You are too valuable to stay hidden your whole life. God sacrificed his only begotten Son so that you may be found, so that you may have life. We as a church have been hidden, as I said in the beginning, right? You guys know this. It's nothing new for you. But as a church, we are making a decision to be found. We're not going to stay hidden forever. We're not going to die in our hiding place. We're not going to die inside of the cave. We're not going to give up inside of the cave. You can't give up inside of the cave either. God's got more for you than that. Can you hear that? Even if you got problems, I hope you can really hear that God is saying, let yourself be found. And we at Melchizedek Christian Church, we're going to let ourselves be found by this city. We're going to let ourselves be found by the people here. We're going to let ourselves be found by this nation and by this world. We're not going to be afraid. We're not going to be ashamed. We're not going to cower away, even if we have to face Goliath. And there are some Goliaths in Nashville, Tennessee. Because we are making a choice as a church to be found. And I hope that in your personal life you can make that choice. And I hope that you say amen and agree as we make that choice together. Because God's about to do incredible things. We've been meeting with people and pastors and leaders, and God's been having us to step out, and we've been doing it. But the time's coming where we're going to be found. Amen. And it's going to be great. And it's going to be so fulfilling and satisfying because we are going to express the glory of God. It's going to be about Him. It's not going to be about us. That's why we've been getting beat up so often. God said, hey, it's not about you. Deal with your Judas. You know. Be encouraged. I want to pray in this way, that you would be humble and receive the grace to make a choice, not to hide. That you would make a choice in your heart to let yourself be found. So if you would, please close your eyes, bow your heads.